And I will ask Puja Swamiji to start with invocation, and then we'll ask Nishenduji to introduce Nileshji. Hari Om.
Hari Om. My prostrations to Gurudev and my pranam to Swamiji. My distinct pleasure to introduce Shri Nilesh and of course he's accompanied by Ashwiniji. Nilesh ji is by profession, not profession but certainly by training, by education, is a chemical engineer from Mumbai, though after having come to Canada and subsequently to United States and having worked for a while, got interested in the Indic sciences and Indology, all the ancient history of our motherland Bharat, and subsequently has done a lot of work on not only ancient India, Indian sciences, but he has also done a lot of work on the dating of Ramayana, dating of Mahabharata, Ravan's Lanka, and many other subjects in the similar fashion. So he has also written some books. He is currently now for more than 20 years he has been doing this. He has done extensive research, and when he says something, it comes with many different proofs that will be presented. So without further ado, I'll introduce Nilesh ji. He will talk for about 30-35 minutes, and then we'll have question and answers, which many times can become more interesting than the talk itself. And with that, just a request to everybody, whoever wants to ask a question, is please keep your question to the subject and keep it very simple. Don't try to make it very elaborate. And Deepaji will be sort of monitoring the Q&A. So with that, Nilesh ji.
Namaskar. Now I feel like giving a TED talk. You know, you don't go beyond this. So namaskar to Pujya Swamiji. Namaskar to everyone in the audience, all the sadhakas. Can everyone hear me well? In the back, thank you. And it's a new battery, so it's going to work fine. But in case that goes away, as I start speaking, usually my voice goes up. Part of the reason is, of course, with my age, my hearing is getting weaker and weaker. So if I start talking loudly, Please understand, I'm not angry or anything. And when you ask the question, please also ask it bit loudly, okay? It's perfectly, you can ask from your place. So we have sort of a 2 sessions. Actually, it's a 1 long session, you may look at it, but don't be worried about it. Long doesn't mean like you're going to listen to my monologue. But there is another group, as you know, the younger students, at some point they will join. So before they come, Deepaji sort of designed it, you can say. So if you like it, I'll take the credit. If you don't like it, I'll okay, you can say, why did you invite this person and why did you select the subject? No, she didn't select the subject. So for the first half, and just so that you have some anticipation, I'll talk for 30 minutes or so, and then we will use the remaining 30 minutes for question and answer. I want to leave sufficient time for that. And in case, usually I have never been to any, I have given like 1,000+ talks by now. And it's never an issue that there are not enough questions. Usually we have to stop it. So I don't think that will be an issue. So the first portion, what I want to talk about is just to share with you the Hindu view of science. Okay. Now, this can be very interactive, and first 30 minutes can be that too. By the way, I'll stop at 30 minutes, and in case I don't, you start clapping. I don't know if allowed here, but if you start clapping, I know I must stop now and get into question and answer. So think about it as I ask these questions. Okay. What, in your mind, what do you know about science? Forget Hindu science or Hindu view of science for a minute. Just in your mind, like, somebody says science, you hear the word science. Or somebody says, do you understand science? Or what discipline did you study in science? What things comes to your mind? Some names, some methodology maybe, some basic fundamental principles. Okay, so think of what you know. The second question I would ask you, again, just you can think in your mind, what do you believe? Now, in this case, I want you to think about what do you believe in the sense of where possibly science began, how long ago that began, and does Hinduism, Sanatan Vedic Dharma, has any connection with it? Did Sanatan Vedic Dharma contributed to this science that we understand today, or did it borrow from it? So what do you believe that may or may not be true? The third question I would ask is, so belief is one thing, but now what do you feel anytime you hear the word science? Now sometimes people may struggle, what's the difference between belief and feel? Just a simple difference I'll tell you is, if it's like a noon and you are listening to a lecture, you would say it's a time for prasadam. Or at evening, you will say it's a time for dinner. I believe it's a time for my dinner. Versus the feeling is, I feel hungry. That's the difference. Okay. And the last one, what do you do about it? When somebody asks you about science, or you hear about science, your connection with science, what do you do? Do in the sense, what's your action? Now I'm going to summarize generally what I hear about these 4 questions in the context of Hindu contribution to science or Hindu view of science. What do you know? I'll tell you my story. When I was in the 9th grade, this is back in India in Maharashtra, and in that physics textbook, there was a name of one Indian name as a scientist, and he had done something in optics. Okay, even the name was like a Marathi. I forgot the name now. He's like a Marathe or Deshpande, And my surprise was, what is this individual doing in a science book? How many of you might have felt that surprise? If you see during your school days, not the young kids, but you say Nilesh Oak as a scientist in some physics books or chemistry or whatever. What's your typical feeling? My feeling was, what is this guy doing here? You know why? Because until then, anytime I read about the scientist, and tell me if that's your experience too. It was Edward Jenner, right? Lavoisier, Kepler, Copernicus, Newton, Einstein. I mean, those were the names I heard. So I said, well, if you have to be scientist, you can't be Indian. Right? The second one, what do we believe? What do you believe? Believe about the science. I mean, where did, if I may make it a bit interactive, just for a minute or so, who wants to answer how long ago the science began, the way we understand science today? Anyone from here? What you children you are studying in school here? What do they teach you in American schools? Where did science begin, or how long ago? Huh? Yeah, take a guess. Well, but even for grown-ups, I mean the parents. What did you study? Like what were you taught? Yeah, very good. Okay. Yeah, I mean I also do corporate training and I give brownie points, you know. So who said Greece? Yeah, you get 5 brownie points, you know. Let's do the competition now, you know. Who gets more brownie points? Okay, so 5 brownie points. Greece. Any other place?
After the dark ages.
Hmm? After the timing wise, very good. After the dark ages, okay. So that was maybe say 500 years ago or so, okay. Anyone knows? Mohenjo-daro. Okay, so we'll come to that too, right? Absolutely. Okay. So now that's a different point of view. So that contradicts with the after the dark age and of course the Greece, right? Mohenjo-daro is right in India now, of course in Pakistan, but the old India. Yes.
People started experimenting with plants.
Experimenting with plants. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's I mean it's like going back, way back. Like anytime people could do some experimentation, okay? I mean that's a answer closer to the truth. Yes.
Starting of the fire.
Starting of a fire. Right.
Like the fire and wheel, that is the invention of wheel and
Good. And fire is like a long time ago. Anyone? How long ago? What you know? Yeah, big. Yeah, we have to stop somewhere, right? So we start with the Big Bang, okay, 13 billion years ago based on the modern science, and now to 5th June 2022, right, for example. But wheel, like for example, do you know like how long ago as you studied, you know, I'm not, no?
don't remember.
Huh. Now that's when we find something surprising. You know, for example, the modern science or the modern studies will tell us the Mexicans did not know about the wheel. Have you heard that? They did not know because they built rectangular pyramids. This is claimed. I'm not saying that's true. Now, how funny is that? Aren't you seeing the sun and the moon and everyone? If you just throw a stone in the pond, it just creates a circle. And somebody didn't think of making anything circular. A cucumber is like a circular. You cut slice into it, it's circular, right? So there is a lot of stuff that is taught to us in a wrong way. What I want to now do is, so the next one is the feeling. Suppose somebody comes and asks you, you as an Indian or of an Indian background, you know, okay? I mean, you know, the younger generation, those who are born here, we as a parents think they are Indians, right? Yeah. They don't think they are Indians. They are not Indians. Okay, they may be in the Indian body, right? The outsiders, I mean, non-Indians will think of them as Indians. In fact, when I started in Canada working, one of my colleague was somebody who was Indian, of Indian origin, bred and brought up, I mean, all in Canada. And I was in sales, and in the big sales meeting, somebody asked me, like, oh, when did you come to this country? So I told him, like, I came here 4 years ago. So they also asked him, when did you come to this country? And we were, both of us were like 25 years old at that time. And but you know, he had a great sense of humor or reality. He said, 25 years ago. Right? So sometimes, you know, that's what I mean. Like sometimes you may be perceived in a different way. So the third one now, so it's a more question for the folks who might be born in India and here. If there is a discussion about science and what India's contribution to science, what do you feel now? If somebody asks you the question, hey, tell me about like, hey, we are, you know, this all science here and light bulbs and aeroplanes and, you know, electricity, smartphones and all this technology, beautiful, wonderful thing, quantum mechanics. What is India's contribution to science? Huh? In what? Numbers. Very good. 0. Okay, 0. Yeah, numbers. Yeah, what else? Medicine. In what way? Surgery. Who said that? Surgery. Okay, the 5 brownie points there. Young kids here, did you know that the surgery as a fundamental discipline? I mean, surgery people would be doing around the world everywhere, right? With whatever tools they have, maybe even stones. But as a discipline, it came from India. How many of you knew that? You knew it, great. In fact, rhinoplasty, have you heard the word rhinoplasty? Like, getting your nose attractive? Well, not always, but just even sometime fixing it. It was practiced in India for such a long time. In fact, now that because the subject came, somebody said medicine, I'm going to give that as a piece of information. Sushruta Samvita, Sushruta is considered the father meaning not just for India, world father of surgery. But even that is not a sufficient information about Sushruta. Sushruta was a father of medicine. Now, if you start studying Sushruta, Sushruta is not saying that he is the father of medicine. There is a long generation of teachers before him, many, many teachers. And as Nishenduji mentioned, like my work started with dating of Mahabharata and dating of Ramayana, which we'll talk in the second half. But one thing led to another. And do you know that how old is Sushruta? Yeah, thank you. If you go to Wikipedia or Google, everyone uses Wikipedia and Google, right? If you do Sushruta, they will say 600 BC. In fact, people even did not admit that. Then what happened? Recently, Columbia University published some small article saying, yes, we agree, Sushruta is a 600 BC. Sushruta is from 600 BC. And many of us Indians were very elated. Oh, finally Columbia accepted that Sushruta is from 600 BC, which is what, 2,500 years old. Many Indians felt good and nothing wrong with it. Do you know one of the reasons why Columbia actually published that? Because I had published before that, showing that, and I presented that at Oxford, I showed that Sushruta, we don't know exact time of Sushruta, but he's definitely more than 8,000 years ago. 8,000 years ago. No questions, no ifs, no buts. Sushruta is mentioned in the Mahabharata, and then when we get to Mahabharata, we will talk about it, okay? Sushruta is mentioned in the Garuda Purana, Sushruta is mentioned, of course, Sushruta Samvita is after him, and he gives a list of things. So it's 8,000 plus years. Now, of course, there may be many other additional improvement in medicine that would have come up, okay? And they are part of the Sushruta Samvita. So, but back to that question, if somebody asks you what is India's contribution, so numbers, medicine, that's great. Now, usually I want astronomy. Now, let me challenge you on that, okay, just for a minute. Haven't you also heard, like, our other individuals said science began in Greece? Haven't you heard that the Indian astronomy came from Greece? How many of you have heard that? The original astronomy is Greece, of course, then it came to India and, Indians started using it, okay? It is, that particular statement is utter nonsense. There is absolutely no basis, no proof whatsoever. Okay? Now what people do, the Western Indologists or other people who will put us on a defensive and then say, oh, so you say Indian astronomy did not come from Greek astronomy? What's your proof? And, and what do we start doing? Yeah, please go ahead. Surya Siddhanta, but Greeks were doing it 500 BC and Surya Siddhanta is only 1500 years old. That's not true, right? No, very good, okay, that's all true. But my point is, he even gave an answer, and thank you, sir, for giving the answer. He said, well, the Surya Siddhanta is much older than the Greece. But if there is a one takeaway, we'll have a few takeaways as we go through this. If there is a one takeaway, and that I try to tell the young kids, but also the grown-ups and everyone, that could be some gene sequence in our Indian gene sequence. I don't know what it is, but if somebody asks the questions, we immediately go and start responding in a way of, well, let me tell you, for example, like Surya Siddhanta. Nothing wrong, that's actually a very correct answer, and thank you. You also get 5 brownie points. The point is, if somebody makes such a claim, don't ask Don't just jump and start telling what the evidence is. I mean, we have to learn to pause, guys. Okay? For example, ask the question, okay, and what is the evidence for Greek astronomy becoming the mother of Indian astronomy? Okay, then they are going to give some answer. I mean, I'm not going to go into that deep subject. Then you say, and what is the evidence for that? And what is the evidence for that? And what is the evidence for that? And do you know what you're going to get? If you are smart at it, you are just going to get one lie after another, another lie, and another lie, and another lie, but no evidence, because evidence simply does not exist. All kinds of arguments will be thrown at you, and immediately say, oh, well, if that is true. Even some of the pro-Indic Indologists, I don't know if you ever had a Konrad Elst here, but Konrad Elst and we are very good friends, okay? There are 30%, 50% things we agree, 50% we completely disagree. But it's not just about agree and disagree. We are going to talk about how Hindu science works, which also we have lost, by the way. Because, many times what happens, and we'll talk in the second half, but something happens, people think, please guys, don't fight. I mean, two Indian researchers, please don't fight. Just do something, come to an agreement. Actually, what do we say? Mundaka Upanishad says, Satyena labhyas tapasa yesha atma samyak jnanena brahmacharena nityam. It's giving the whole recipe of a science. This one shlok, and many of you even would know this by heart, this just one shlok is giving you, and I can tell you many other shlok, we'll discuss few, gives the recipe of what Hindu science is. Satyena labhyas tapasa yesha atma. Atma, we'll leave it to, all the great erudite people there and Swamiji and, discussing that. Atma has many meanings as a knowledge and, the existence, the ultimate reality, and so on. To understand that, you have to find the truth, which means what? I'll come to the Samshaya part, When something is only one, for example, what is your name? Okay, or how old I am. There are not multiple answers. Okay, there is just one answer. We may agree, disagree, and don't say, no, please come to some compromise. No, there is a truth out there. So Satya, we may be able to find it, we may not able to find it. And it's perfectly okay to say, I don't know, when you don't know the answer. Somebody tries to trap you with, show me the Pushpak Viman engine. You say, I don't know, but I know the descriptions of Pushpak Viman. I know all the descriptions in the Ramayana, when exactly it was used and so on, right? So that's Satyena labhyas tapasa yeshatma. The next one, Samyak jnanena brahmacharyena nityam. Now, Samyak jnan, which is to have an unbiased attitude. Totally unbiased attitude is very much required. This is the view of Hindu science. You are not ready to do science until you have a Samyak attitude. You are not emotionally attached to either the belief you have, therefore I ask you, what do you believe about science? You are not emotionally attached to your belief, you are not emotionally attached to what you know, you are not emotionally attached to what you feel. Okay, you are ready for anything that comes in your way. And brahmacharya, now brahmacharya has again many meanings, okay, again I will just avoid the digression, but in this particular context it means contemplation, thinking, okay, how to properly think is a big issue. So you need these ingredients to do this. Another ingredient I will tell you from Bhagavad Gita, that is again Hindu view of science. Science meaning for everything, science means jnana, vidyan. In Bhagavad Gita you are going to hear these words all the time, jnana and vidyan. Vidyan is a realized knowledge. Okay. If you look at the Daivi Pravrutti, Daivi Guna, I mean, I know in Chinmaya mission, everyone knows Bhagavad Gita by heart, right? Even before the prasad, we will, again, you guys do it here, 15th chapter I have seen in Velianad, the 15th chapter will be recited. I mean, Ashwini, and now Ashwini knows many, many more Bhagavad Gita verses than I do, okay? But that time when we went there, and then suddenly everyone started, we visited in 2018, and we were there for 4 weeks. And suddenly at that time they started 15th chapter recitation. Lucky me, in my high school it was compulsory for me that unless I know the 15th chapter, I cannot sit for the 8th grade exam. So that came out pretty handy, and she said, well, so nice that at least you know, right, when you are just saying this. So one of the things just you see in the 16th, so abhayam sattva samshuddhir jnana yoga vyavasthiti, of course it goes through many, but the first word abhayam, you should be fearless, which means you are not worried to speak the truth, okay? And what is the last one in that list? Amanita, namrata, and you should be extremely humble. About what? That you can be wrong. Unless, now doesn't mean that you have to be wrong to make some revolutionary discoveries, but unless you are willing to be wrong, you cannot make revolutionary discoveries. Usually, like when I'll come to you and talk about how did I figure out Ramayana or Mahabharata dating, I'm going to tell you only the good part, what worked, how it nicely I solved it, you know. And therefore, sometimes people think, oh, you know, you did that, I also want to do something. Can you tell me where to start? If I'm going to tell you where to start, then that will be my story, that won't be your story, which is fearless. You're going to fail many times, and you also need to be therefore humble. You know, that's perfectly fine. Acknowledge it. A couple more points, 3-4 more points. Now, in science, like the science that you know, anyone wants to answer again? Like what some of the things you do? Like what do you, 3 or 4 things that you will do as a science? Anyone? Like what is the biggest, one of the biggest scientific revolution, discovery you can think of? Gravity. So Newton's theory of gravity, right? We know that, Newton's theory of gravity. It needs 5 things. You know, Sir Karl Popper, I consider him one of my gurus. Okay. He's in the modern science or philosophy of science. He describes scientific method like this. He says it is a triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing, or you can think of explanation as the evidence, explanation, prediction, testing in the context of a theory, in the context of a background knowledge, and one important thing, which Hindu science describes it very well, actually many times missed in the Western science, is that you do this to solve the toughest unsolved problem. In fact, Shankaracharya also uses that word, you know, when he's in a different context, but when he's talking Samshaya, he says Samshaya is good, but the Samshaya should be Saprayojana and Sandigdha. Sandigdha because there are like multiple answers to it. For example, anyone here has a doubt that me here who is standing is Nilesh Oak? Anyone has a doubt? No. If there is no doubt, we don't spend much time on it. Are you really Nilesh Oak? No, nothing. That's done. Just move to the next thing. But as soon as we have a doubt, for example, when did the Mahabharata war happen? Or when exactly the science began, or something like this. That's a sandigdha. We have uncertainty, so we need that. And saprayojan. This is also very important. And it just, I don't want to put the pressure, but during the question answer, see if you can remember that. Sometime for fun, I may ask you. People ask question. One of the question, like, of course, when Nishinduji and we had a discussion, but even with our few other friends we met in Chicago during this trip, one of the things, most of you will be able to relate to it, they said, you know, Nileshji, that's all great, I mean, what you have done. Not Nishinduji, yeah? So my other friend asked that. He said, please tell me, when is Kali Yuga ending? Right? Now, I have many talks on a Yuga, like, you know, how we have sometimes confused with this and so on. So that's not a subject today. But I said, well, actually, listen to my talk. Somebody said, actually, I have listened to your talks. So thank you very much, I listened to it. Now tell me, when is the Kali Yuga ending? Now the real answer is, if the person would have listened to my talks, I mean, he might have listened to it and understood, then the person should not ask me when Kali Yuga is ending. Okay, Raja Kalasya Karanam, that's Mahabharata says, depending on the behavior, certain Yuga. Raja brings a certain Yuga. But the point is, people still want the answer. So do you know what I said? I said answer, I'm going to slightly change that. How many of you are interested, if at all possible, to know exactly when Kali Yuga is ending? Everyone? Okay, but a bit hesitant to raise the hand, right? Okay, yeah. Well, here is the good news. You have found a person who knows exactly when it's ending. Huh? You're not supposed to ask, but still I'm going to give you the answer. Okay, but I'll come to Saprayojan, by the way, in a minute. Is everyone ready to note it down? Okay, you can text it, WhatsApp it afterwards, you know, to your friends. Hey, this is when it's ending. And you can also tell them nothing to worry, you know. 5th of June, 5,622. Okay? How many of you have heard that 83% of statistical data is made on the spot? Right? Like, the McKinsey experts will know that. Right? What is it? I just made it up. 5th June, I took it. The other day when I told my friend, I said 3rd of June and 5622, something like this. My point is, if I give you that answer, you don't question it, then okay, maybe the answer is right, maybe the answer is wrong. That's the next point I want to tell you. Okay? But it doesn't matter. We can work with that. I mean, what is the Shankaracharya said, of course in a different context, but Manu has also said that, Satyanrute dve mithuni krutya vartate lokayatra. And even Manu also says, in a vyavasaya, okay, or what you call the Vaishya, the Vanijya, he says, Satyanrute Vanijya, in the business, you have to use a mixture of both, right? I was a salesperson, that is a Vanijya in a way, So person says, yeah, you are selling this plastic to me or this turbine to me for this, but what's your real cost? Do you think I would tell what the real cost is to my customer? No. Although Satya I have to speak, but I will not able to because the whole negotiation gets in a different. Some cases it is appropriate. Okay? All right. So one thing is when you hear some news, someone says, for example, Mahabharat war happened in 5561 BCE, more than 7,500 years ago. Now that is my research. What is your immediate reaction? More than 7,500 years ago. What are some of your reactions if you hear about it and you haven't listened to me before on YouTube? That's pretty old. Is it believable? How did I come with that number? Very good. Anything else? Like anyone has heard any other dates?
Any evidence for that?
Very good. Any evidence for it, right? Sorry, something else? Somebody said something? So these are the questions, but one more question somebody may ask, actually should ask, and that is true for any question, which is I'm pointing to Saprayojan. He says, if you find the answer to this question, what is the benefit? Okay? So many people will tell me, Nilesh, you wasted your life. Okay, Mahabharata, Ramayana, whenever that happened, that's okay. Like, look at the present and look at the future. I get this like lots of emails. Look at the future. Why are you wasting time in history and so on and so forth? So what's the purpose of history? It's not a question even I want to answer. I know the answer, but everyone has to find their answers, and the answers are out there. Like some of the situation that we are in are because of that. I want to talk about a few more principles. We'll get into question answers. Vitanda. Everyone has heard the word Vitanda? Vitandavad. Bhai, Vitanda mat karo, right? Something of that effect. Do you know what is the Nyaya Darshana definition of Vitanda? So beautiful. It says, Swa Pratipaksha Sthapana Hino Vitanda. If you want to debate with someone and question someone, I don't agree with you. Somebody says, I don't agree with your 5561 BC. It's not sufficient to say that, look, you are wrong. I don't know where Mahabharata war happened, but you are wrong. That is Vitanda. It says, Swa Pratipaksha Sthapana Hino Vitanda. Meaning, unless you have an alternate position, a counter position of your own, and still you are fighting, debating with somebody else, you are doing Vitanda. Now, Swamiji said, what is the evidence? That same Nyaya Darshana says, unless you have a evidence in support of whatever you are claiming, please do not open your mouth. Of course, it says in a very simple and clean language, it says, Pramana Taschartha Pratipatte. We establish things only with the evidence. Now, out of the Shad Darshanas, of course, here many Vedanta students, that is one of the 6 Darshanas. Nyaya Darshana is one of the hard realist Darshana. Hard realist, more realistic than the modern science. Modern science is confused. Now, beauty of Nyaya Darshana is modern science cannot go beyond the material existence. They don't accept there is something beyond. Nyaya Darshana has no problem. Nyaya Darshana has no problem with the experience of one person. So suppose I am doing a meditation or whatever I am doing and I get a certain experience. I am eating certain kind of food and it benefits me in some way. Immediately, unless I have a evidence, I should not go and tell others and insist that everyone should do it. That's understandable. But I'm perfectly okay to do it for myself. Atma pratiti. Okay, Nyaya Darshana is perfectly okay with that. Swarthanuman. In fact, Nyaya Darshana insists that don't go and tell anyone anything until you have realized it yourself. Swarthanuman first and then Pararthanuman. And I'll end with that one. Now, what is a Pararthanuman method in a Nyaya Darshana? Which is again how the Hindu method is. Remember what I said, Sir Karl Popper's method for logic of scientific method. Sir Karl Popper, by the way, is the best name that you are going to get right now on what the philosophy of science is, east, west, but I will say west, you know. My study started with Sir Karl Popper, and I was fascinated. I'm studying this for 30 plus years. I became familiar with his work in 1993, so 29 years. So my journey from modern science, it was backward to Nyaya Darshana and to other Darshan Shastra and Sankhya and so on. So remember what I said, triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing in the context of a theory, in the context of a background knowledge. Nyaya Darshana talks about Pararthanuman. Once you are realized, once you are convinced, you have the evidence, now you are ready to tell others. There are 5 Avayava steps. I will not bore you with the Sanskrit names there, but they exactly match what I told you, the 5 steps that Karl Popper was saying. Triangulation, the 3, theory, background knowledge, and trying to solve a toughest problem. I can go on and on, but I'm going to stop, give you some time for question and answer. And if you go through all Darshana Shastras, you're going to find a lot. You're going to find now Shabda, we say Guru's word, has a value, of course, because the Guru is a realized person. But nowhere it is said that you take that word without questioning it or without truly experimenting with it, without truly understanding it. Okay? For example, Srimad Bhagavad Puran, do you know what it says? It says it's a special, amazing thing about anyone who is a seeker, and a Hindu civilization is a civilization of seekers. Okay? It's not like thou shall do this. And you know what it says? Atmano Guru Atmaeva. This is Bhagavad Puran. You know, Purushasya Visheshata. This is something so important about a person who is a seeker. Yat pratyaksha anumanabhyam shrayo savanu vindate. If you develop skill in pratyaksha and anuman together, you can be your own guru. That is the promise of a Bhagavata. Okay, but of course you have to become an expert. And how do you become an expert? By going to a guru. You know, that's the kind of circular journey. On that, I want to stop. Let's take time for some questions. Please. Yeah, and I'm going to repeat the question, you know, so, yeah. Yeah, so. Okay, yeah. So one thing is, if you would like to come here in the front and ask the question, that's great. If you are hesitant for whatever reason, just stand where you are. I may come close to you and just hear the question. I will repeat it. Okay? Yeah, please.
Yeah, Nilesh, what inspired you to start this research?
What inspired me? Well, actually, thank you. That's a good question. That is a question we all should ask ourselves with whatever we are doing. How many of you are here into painting, for example? Anyone in painting? Yeah, right. And I mean, I can ask them that question because my painting is so bad. I mean, I can barely get the circle, you know, like or something. Now, I had a great teacher on the art, and you know, that person will say, oh, okay, just a Nisarga Chitra, you know, like, well, do like a 4, the Indian 4, and that becomes a bird. I mean, the painters would know that. But if I do 4, it looks like a 4. It doesn't look like a bird. So there is something that kind of gives you from inside. So I don't know exactly what it is. If something comes from inside, but I think it is samskar possibly. It's a mixture of both. It's a mixture of what the baggage you bring and what you study, and also then your free will. Are you willing to give sufficient efforts, sufficient time? Are you willing to go away from certain things? So the answer is not like what inspired me. But one thing I will tell you, once I started this journey, not that I was watching a lot of TV anyways, but I watch zero TV. And this is not now, this is going back for 25 plus years. I don't read newspapers. And slowly I stopped all magazines. And no, you might wonder, so hey, you don't know anything about the world, right? If you're not doing this. Well, I'll say maybe after our session, try me. Ask me anything going on in the world. Usually what I find is anything important, it comes to me, whether I want to know it or not. Okay? That's not a great answer to your question, but truly I don't know. When I did my first discovery in 2009, at middle of the night, it was Friday, and people asked me, so what was, because this is something I was working on, that one single shlok from Mahabharata for 15 years. And they said, what was you must be very proud of yourself, happy, joyful, something like this. And yes, I might have thought the same way too. The first thing, in fact, when I finally made that discovery, it's like a eureka moment. Everyone has heard of eureka moment. My first reaction was, this can be true. Something that I wanted to happen for 15 years, when actually it happens, I said, I must have made some mistake. And then finally, so it was midnight or so, then I worked until 5 o'clock in the morning. This is Friday evening, Friday night going on. Finally, I was convinced, and then I went to bed. But what was the feeling? It was a feeling of what we end up typically with saying, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Just a peace, happy, content. If I said, if my lifetime is over and this is the time to go, today is a good day. There was no excitement, frankly. There was that Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, that prasannata in the sense of a calmness. That's the kind of feeling I can say.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
So I was missing some of the talk, particularly because maybe it may not have been coming clear. My question is, so you may have answered that already, but my question is, when you were discussing the age of Mahabharata, 7,500 years, so there were several pointers from the audience. So the issue is, if you know the age, or if we know the age, or if we know that it really was true, then it becomes believable. Something believable, then you can, why it's important? Because if you can really believe in something, then you pay more sort of attention to it. But if you don't really want to know if it happened or it didn't happen, then how would you believe something? So I think from the point of believability, it's important that it really happened, or for one way we can say we don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, until now, some people, so is there a question? Like,
that's the question. That's the question.
And what is it again?
No, is there a strong evidence you can say that this is really how it happened?
Correct.
Or maybe it was a story written afterwards,
Right.
and nobody even knew that this happened.
Right. Okay. And in the second half, we are going to talk exactly that, like, when did Ramayana happen, when did Mahabharata happen in a short way. But also, one of the point he said, very important, is like, why bother? Even in my corporate training also, like the 3 questions, and if you go to LinkedIn, you'll see some of my students, now they're in the great positions, they will talk about it. And he says, hey, Nilesh taught me this. Actually, it's not something out of ordinary, extraordinary or anything. But usually anything that I started, I worked for GE for 16 years, and anything they say, hey, can we do this? And I used to ask this question. I said, tell me what is that is not happening, first question. Tell me what makes you think that, what makes you say that, which means show me the data, the evidence, okay? And then I used to ask, so what? Why bother? If we do this, if we fix this, whatever it is we need to do, we buy that new computer, whatever it is, what will it do different that it's not doing now, and why we need it? So that applies to everything that we do. Therefore, I said sandigdha and saprayojana. We'll go to the next question. Yeah.
General word Vijnana. People think Vijnana means science, but in spirituality, Vijnana has different meaning. So what is the proper word for science in Sanskrit? Number 1. Number 2, as you say, the evidence. Do you have the evidence about the Indian Hindus did experiment with the documentation or evidence?
Okay. Okay, so second word, documentation, meaning ability to write, do you mean? Ability to write? Absolutely, okay. And that's a great, so first one is, what is the word for science, okay? Now, of course, scientia, the scientia, that's the word. No, I mean, to answer your question, I would not get too stuck into the words and what is the right translation. See, what has happened is, sometimes we have to live with it. So, for example, like people say, oh, should we say Hindu Dharma versus Sanatan Vedic Dharma? Okay, I mean, yeah, we may understand the differentiation. Yaskacharya, the Niruktakar, he defines Sanatana as, again, very scientific definition, by the way. Again, we are talking Hindu view of science. Do you know how Yaskacharya defines Sanatana? Anyone? He defines Sanatano Nityanutanaha. Sanatan is that which is capable of refreshing itself, and not only capable, but which encourages and which insists on refreshing itself. Sanatano Nityanutana. Which is what science is. Science is perfectly, the modern science is perfectly fine saying this is wrong. What I thought yesterday was wrong. Ptolemy was wrong, Copernicus says. What did Copernicus say? Sun at the center. Yeah, but the orbits are circular. Kepler came and said, well, sun is the center, but the orbits are not circular. They are elliptical. And so on and so forth. Then Newton comes and says, this doesn't only apply to the planets, it applies to everything. If you throw the stone at the window, you can use the same formula. And Einstein said, Newton, you are wrong. And he just goes on and on. Sanatano Nityanutana. Okay. The second one you said, do we have a documentation? We'll talk a little bit in the Ramayana Mahabharata, like how we find, when we find something fascinating, next to impossible, it cannot be just a coincidence, then our confidence in that thing goes up. Fair? Okay, let's do a small, you are asking next question, yeah. Let's do a small quick experiment. I'm going to ask you to guess something. Don't tell that number to me or don't blurt it out. Just imagine in your head. Pick that number very small, I mean easy number, so that because you're going to do some math with it. Everyone, no talking to each other, just to yourself. Just to make that point, it's a fun experiment. Imagine one simple number, whole number. If you want to use a fraction, then you have a tough math ahead of you. Simple number, just imagine, every one of you imagine one number in your mind. Everyone did that? Okay. Don't tell that number. Now, double it. Everyone knows how to double that number? Okay, double it, okay? Don't talk to each other. Now, into that, what day is today? 5th of June, right? Okay. Into that, add 18. So, you imagine a number, you doubled it, now add to that 18, 18. Now, you have one number, right? First number, you doubled it, add 18, okay. Now, look at this whole number, and now you have to divide this number by 2. You have to divide this number by 2. You are going to get another number. If anyone needs time, just raise your hand, okay, in doing the math. Okay. Now you have a number after dividing by 2. Now from this number, again, you don't tell me the original number you imagine, but subtract that original number that you had imagined. Okay? Now I'm going to tell you what the remaining stuff is. It's 9. How many of you are like, wow? Nobody? Oh, this is a very smart group. This is a very smart group, right? Okay? Now, yeah, now I used to do this in corporate training, and in a group of 30, there will always be 6 folks, who will say, like, how did you do it? My point was, of course, everyone knows what this simple experiment is. But those of you, those few people who might be surprised, wow, how did he figure this out? I'm saying, not in this trickery way that I did it, but what if we can get evidence? What if we have something said in Mahabharata? What if we have said something that is said by Valmiki in Ramayana? What if we have something said by Vyasadeva in Mahabharata that we think today with our current knowledge, our knowledge of the humanity, next to impossible. But then when we do the research, we find actually that did happen. And not just one instance, but one after another. What if I can show you 300 instances for Mahabharata? What if I can show you 600 instances for Ramayana? At some point, would you start saying, maybe this is true? Because otherwise it's totally impossible. So that's the kind of evidence we have. That's the genius, and again, you were there yesterday, that's the genius of the Hindu science. How they used the existing knowledge to embed that information for us, for the benefit of us, for the benefit of posterity.
Namaskar, Nilesh. The question I have is, our Vedas and those Shrutis are stored, maintained for many, many years as a Ganapata and all that. So our scriptures like Mahabharata, for example, is there any encryption or like Ganapata or maintenance of such so that it was preserved in its original format? And one more curiosity question is, which shloka was that intrigued you and that made you work hard? Thank you.
Thank you. So kind of two questions. Somebody, I mean, the other group joined or not yet? Okay, no, that's fine, yeah. So two questions. One is like the way our Vedas were preserved in many different ways. He mentioned Ghanapat, but there is like a first round of saying it. And Government of India has made a beautiful site. If you go there at the IGNCS site, a portal, not just Rigveda, all Vedas, even additional Vedas, and they are doing this Ganapatha and anything that goes even beyond that, something beyond my knowledge. How they would use different notifications, notices, like hands, gestures, to remember the words, okay? Ganapatha is like a cube, you know, the way it is remembered in such a way that you can wake up that person in the middle of night and the person is going to tell what that is, okay? So is there a documented evidence of it? The documented evidence is in the form of the living tradition, The documented evidence, which is much later, is in the form of how the notations are given. Like for the swar that goes up, for the swar that goes down, right? For example, Om Tvanno Asya Amate Rutakshudo Abhishaste Ravasprudi Tvanna Uti Tava Chitraya Diya Shiksha Shachishta Gatuvita. Mahabharata is not to be chanted like that. This is more for the Samhitas, meaning tenacity. Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna. Patanjali says, you know, everyone can get that with the Shraddha, right? Actually, all of us, I mean, how many of you have a say Rigveda? I mean, how many of you have heard of Rigveda? I mean, all of you, right? Our original Grantha and so on and so forth. How many of you have read Rigveda? Truthful answer, I know that. Even if you start reading Rigveda, unless you have a context, you are going to fall asleep very fast. Which means what? If anyone has a sleeping problem, guys, get a copy of Rigveda. At a bedtime, start reading Rigveda. A good night's sleep is assured. Okay? Now, actually, it's very boring. Okay? Now, I'm not saying it's a boring. If you don't have a context for it, why? Remember Sandigdha and Saprayojan. Why are you even reading Rigveda? Oh, because my mom told me to. Okay? Then just go and ask the mom, Mom, how long you spend time reading Rigveda? Okay? Then it will be an interesting discussion. So, so we don't have that. The second one you had, I'll just answer and I'll repeat that again. It was, so this was 1993, 94, somewhere there, but for storytelling, I say 1995 because I want to be factually correct because I don't remember exactly when that was. I was, almost my master's was done, this was in Canada in my chemical engineering. And I said, okay, let's go to the Indian session. You know, I was even looking for some of the translation of the book that, and this is going back 30 years. It was not so easy to get the books or something like this. Things were costly in a different way, like telephone was very costly. Many would know that, you know, phone call to India and whatnot. So I was going through the Indian section of the University of Alberta Library, looking for just books because I had a time now. And I was a student of Bhagavad Gita in a way, like my mom taught me, like when I was very young. And so I said, well, I knew that Bhagavad Gita was part of Mahabharata. I also knew it was in a Bhishma Parva, but I didn't know exactly where it was in a Bhishma Parva. How many of you knew that Bhagavad Gita is a part of Mahabharata text? Most of you know that, yeah? But I didn't know where. It was in Bhishma Parva, I knew that. So I went to the to the library. I started reading it. So this is a perfect timing. Yeah, let them come, you know. So this is, I'll just wait for them to come for a minute. Yeah. So what a perfect, nice segue here, okay? This is the timing to go into the dating of Mahabharata and dating of Ramayana.
Uh,
I'll tell you this verse and then I will start somewhat backwards, which is this. So I wanted to find where Bhagavad Gita is in the Bhishma Parva, but not knowing, I started with a Bhishma Parva. If you have seen the Bhandarkar Oriental Critical Edition, it's like this thick, okay, just the Bhishma Parva. So I opened the first Adhyay, I started reading through it, second Adhyay, and although my Sanskrit that time was not that great or even it's not that great now, I don't know what it is, maybe my mother tongue being Marathi, but most of anyone with any Indian spoken language, usually, you will do reasonably good with Sanskrit. The first draft you can get 20, 30, 40%, depending on your background. So, but what surprised me is I forgot everything about Bhagavad Gita because I read first chapter, that was just before the Mahabharata war is going to begin. I read second chapter, third chapter. I didn't go beyond that. The second and third chapter of Bhishma Parva are filled with the kind of evidence that some of you are asking, or Swamiji asked, what evidence do you have? It was filled with these verses. They sound like a Bhagavad Gita because it's Anushtup Chanda. Whole Mahabharata is Anushtup Chanda, right? So it will sound like that. Krutva changarako vakra jeshtaya madhusudana anuradha prarthayate maitram samshayamanniva nunam mahadbhayam krishna kuruna samupastitam visheshena hi varshneya chitra pidayate graha. But this is all astronomy going on. This is all astronomy. Okay? Dhruvam prajvalitam ghoram apasavya pravartate chitra swatyantare chaiva dishtita parushagraha vakranu vakram krutvam cha shravane pavaka prabha brahmarashi samavritta lohitango vyavastita. Sounds like Bhagavad Gita, but actually, because of Anushtup Chanda, it's all astronomy. So the one verse that I came across, because all these things I did not understand at that time. I understood the meaning, but my knowledge of astronomy was limited. The one verse that changed my life, that stopped me watching TV, okay, was this. In the second chapter, second Adhyay of Bhishma Parva, it says, Ya chaisha visruta rajas trailoke sadhu sammata arundati taya pesha vasishta prushtata kruta. A simple translation. I just recited these words to impress you. Okay? Okay, now I can trust this guy. This guy knows. See how easily we can fall for it? Yachesha Visruta Rajas, the quick translation is, he says, Vyasadeva has come to Dhritarashtra. He's making a final attempt to stop the war, if possible. Everyone has made an attempt. Bhagwan Krishna has also made the attempt. So Vyasadeva is saying, you know what, I don't see these good signs everywhere. See if you can tell your son. And Dhritarashtra somewhere actually thinks that his side is going to win. Okay, they have a more army, is it not? 11. 11 is to 7, that is the ratio. So they think they are going to win. And Vyasadeva is telling different things. Many things that I just recited right now is been told by Vyasadeva to Dhritarashtra. One of the things that he also said, and that was like the toughest unsolved problem that I talked about. So now in the first part we talked about the Hindu view of science. Remember, toughest unsolved problem. I'm going to take that and show you how we use that to encode, decode, whatever we want to do in the world, our shastras, whatnot. So that particular verse said, Vyasadeva says, my dear king, Dhritarashtra, that Arundhati and Vasishta in the sky. Now, how many of you have watched the night sky with stars? The young, yeah, good. How many of you can point out the pole star? Okay, very good. How many of you are familiar with what we call the Big Bear or the Panhandle, like a 4 stars and a 3 stars in the sky in the northern direction, right? So those of you who know this, so 4 stars, that is like sort of a rectangle, and then there are 3 additional stars, the tail, okay, or the handle. The middle star is Vashishta. In the modern astronomy, it's called Mizar. Next to that, there is a very small star. In modern astronomy, it's called Alcor. In Indian astronomy, it is Arundhati. And what Vyasadeva is telling Dhritarashtra is, my dear king, at this... Okay. I can, okay. Okay. Do you want me to stop at some point immediately?